Kia ora, tula ni Hauora. My name is Suaree Borell. Thanks for the awesome introduction. My story with Ivan was about my name. So my name is Suaree Borell, good Māori name. I am Māori Samoan, my mother is Samoan and my father is Māori. And I have a Thai name, so in 1976, you didn't have a midwife, you had a doctor, and the doctor's name was Dr. Suaree, so it's Suaree, and I was named after the doctor. So it didn't catapult me to any kind of astronomical heights to mimic the namesake, but I did Google her later in my 20s to find out that she became a professor emeritus at the University of Thailand. So in obstetrics, naturally, because she was there with my mother when my mother birthed me. So that's my name. That's my and my presentation is my fave. So I'm really conscious and aware of the time too, and actually think I was just lucky to make the rank that I made the list of people they would want to approach. So I'm just going to not necessarily minimise and rip you off from my presentation, but I am going to skip through the important part and get to the relevance of why I'm in the presentation today. So I'm just going to go with, so relying on Wi-Fi and good technology, so I'm just going to use my presentation here and try not to look at the actual presentation. So I have a role in public health workforce development, so all my colleagues are here in the room, and it's a regular scene, and we all ultimately, I believe, try to work towards a collective spirit around what it is to be working in public health. So for the last year and a bit, the role of Te Kākaro has been focusing on developing the core competencies for the public health workforce, which is a national role. So Hāpai told is a Māori organisation, but we deliver to any provider that has a public health FTE in it, and I'm tasked with giving them the public health training around how to reduce and minimise gambling harm. So to me, I talked about how the structure, learning the structure of health and how that works is important, and gambling is one of those things that sit outside vote health. The money sits there for about a minute, maybe even 30 seconds, and then it moves directly over to the ministry, which has a small team, and they portion out funds to address harm. So that's how we fund it, and so we'd acknowledge the ministry and all the DIA people around having the service exist. So I landed the best job, that always helps. So I got given the opportunity to create a set of competencies that would guide and shape the workforce practice in the gambling harm, and conducted a rapid review. So I just looked at the relevant literature in New Zealand and internationally, and based on the rapid review I did some key informants. I'd love to name drop, but those names wouldn't mean anything in this particular forum. So, but I spoke to all the smart guys and the people with the professornesses and the doctorates and all of those kind of things. And then I said, actually, what they know and what I need my workforce to know are miles apart, so I'm actually going to focus on what my workforce want to know. So the competencies that I've developed are strongly user-based. So I went to the workforce and I made them the centre of what matters for the competencies. So Health Promotion Forum, PHA, they did the same thing. So Suaree talked about the importance of the values that guide and basically nurture and support the application of our principles. So there's a technical report on public health competencies that's been finalised. It's an interesting read. From all the interviews and the rapid review of the literature, I developed 8 competencies. There are over 3 levels. We have the developing competency level, the consolidating competency level, and the highly effective competency. So unlike the other 2 speakers, I'm just actually going to talk about a very small universe that I know about, and it's the universe that I created through these competencies. Does that make sense? So what I focused on for the competencies was the importance of staircase learning. So when you're trying to become competent in something, you move through the ranks, So if I wanted to be a grand master Japanese chef, I wouldn't jump to preparing the highly sacred blowfish. I would start with cooking the rice. So competency is about creating a staircase pathway to improving people's skills across a whole range of items. So you start on what's termed the simplest level, and then you move up to the high level. So the competencies that I have clear learning outcomes from you. So from those 8 competencies that I talked about, each of those modules have learning outcomes that are clearly stated at the beginning, and the content matches the outcomes. So I decided to use and include. Okay, can I use this clicker? Oh yeah. Sorry. Technology always deserts me. I'm going to throw that away. So I said, so these are the important things that are in the competency modules that are available for the gaming hard workforce. So I included videos and animations to relay important ideas. If I hadn't had the time, I would show you this really important movie called Penguins and Peacocks. Google it, it's on YouTube, and it's an explanation of how to understand diversity in the workplace. It's about this cool ass peacock and who gets brought into line by the penguins, and then they have this interesting discussion around what it means to fit into the workplace. I haven't got time to show it to you today, but I wanted to make the content of these competencies as vibrant and engaging as possible, because while literacy is important and reading and writing are really great skills, the way we engage people to new knowledge or the way we socialise people to learning is radically different to what it used to be. So then we have the good old readings, and I end with a couple of questions. So the questions part of the competencies, or the modules from those 8 modules, are around getting the user, the learner, to understand, now that I know these things, how do I respond to questions like this, or how am I able to respond to issues X, Y, and Z from a public health perspective. I'm going backwards. Hāpai. So the role, I wanted to talk a little bit today, probably this is the most important slide, is the role of cultural competency, the role of reflection and cultural competency. So when we talk about being culturally competent, we're talking about a what, not a why. So the argument that you need to be culturally competent from where I stand is long done, it's long put to bed, there's no reason to validate why we need them. We clearly need them. The important discussion is on what they are and what are the scopes of practice that we're talking about when we're trying to continue to support communities, much like the mums we had up before, much like other groups we've had today. So with a focus on skill building, so these competencies, there's a clear focus on building skills, which backs onto my practice argument. And the capacity to work to meet future demands, so that's something that to me is critically aware of in terms of meeting the future health needs of our community. So the New Zealand population, I'd like to acknowledge John because he sits on my advisory group and he's a good man. But he's also been throughout, we've been on this journey together too. So I'm tasked with providing workforce development to the Asian Family Services. I go to John and I ask him quite clearly, what are the things that I can do to support your organisation? I wouldn't assume that I could come in and train them because I don't have his language, there's many languages. So in that position where you get to make a decision and you can help someone do workforce development, it's best to be guided by focusing on what they need as an organisation. I think in the end, true to form, I went to shoving them lunch. I think we've got to I think Takakon was going to shout some lunch for that training. And again, that idea of working in where you can and trying to meet that particular workforce needs. So I've already kind of copied on the why, not the what. The competencies that I've developed have 3 options. So there's the self-assessment option, there's a rich dialogue process, and there's the portfolio approach. So the self-assessment process is where they are introduced to the 8 modules, and then they go through and they assess themselves on each of the elements. So there's components to that module, and they reply always, rarely, sometimes, never. And then that's about them being conscious of the way that they practice, the way they deliver their skills, the way they practice certain things. And then from that, they're able to self-assess around where they're sitting on their competency. The rich dialogue process is the creation of an interview schedule. So this can be used with managers, this can be used at a community level, it can be used at a whānau day, where we use an interview schedule to guide a rich conversation around how are we performing, where are our strengths, where are our challenges, and what will we need to do to get to here in 5 years. Now these are all important things for me from a workforce development perspective around making sure that you have a skilled workforce, which is what Tipi and Dal is going to talk about in the workshop. So the portfolio approach is your stock standard portfolio approach. Showed me that you can do X, Y, and Z, but we've also been open with how you do that. You can submit a video application, you can present, you can single wire. So all of this is aiming to be all facilitated online. So that doesn't mean that I don't have a physical presence, but it just means that we're self-directing the workforce through an online dashboard. We monitor and evaluate the workforce and see where they're at and able to intervene before we get in the horrible stuff. The modules and the readings are all held online, and every Wednesday from 11 to 1 our service is online, and people can hop online and they can talk to us through Google Hangout or just a text box chat, so they can hop in and they can ask any questions that they have about public health. All in aid of, as I said, ensuring that public health is improving the lives of New Zealanders. So engaging with management, we'll also go that one, that's not really. Understanding the importance of getting cultural competency. Tipi talked about communication, Suaree talked about communication, so understanding how to engage with your particular population is really important. Watch the penguins and the peacock videos, very good. I've included it in the modules too, just so that people understand it. And we're moving to a new space in mentoring and public health supervision. So there's a tendency before for people to say, look, what you need to do public health is to have a qualification in public health. And that's true, because it's always good to have a solid foundation, and Tipi was talking about that. But there also needs to be some kind of layer of mentoring and supervision, because I was trained in lots of things at the University of Auckland, and then I got a public health role and didn't know how to do it. That was 15 years ago, thank the Lord. But now I'm a highly skilled public health practitioner. I still gave the University of Auckland $35,000 and came up not knowing about public health. Why not? Because the qualifications weren't there. I'm saying they are there now, but we also need to layer that support, that layer of supervision and mentoring, so people can say, hey, yeah, I know how to do this, this, and this, but I'm not too confident to do this. We've covered the challenges and limitations in public health, and having a competent, capable workforce is the why versus the what. That kind of goes on forever. There are some people like Tipi has said who don't get it, and there will always be the why do we need to do this, why do we need to do that. I don't know how you get around that, but just acknowledge it, I suppose, and move on. Funding movement, so when funding moves, which is another reason why I try to employ my whānau specifically, to pay attention to the reading of the budget. Now, when the reading of the budget comes, when the government announces its budget, if money is moving from Vote Health, it's coming from somewhere, and it may just be you. So pay attention to what the funding movements are, what those processes are at the highest level, because they shape the environments we work on at a day-to-day level. Cultural anonymity with cultural competency is another nice area that I like for me, because I've always found it puzzling that as a Māori researcher, my background is in research and evaluation, as a Māori researcher I had to prove that I was culturally competent, but I wasn't able to challenge non-Māori to say, well, how do I know that you're competent to deal with Pākehā? And so there's this anonymity that we accept when we choose to put our culture up on the spotlight, but not the mainstream culture. So I believe cultural competency requires a lot more sophisticated responses to it rather than just saying we need this because these people need it. We also need to be able to challenge the dominant status quo and say that these practices are not enough. I may be out on a limb there, but that's okay. And so we're talking about this too with the systems thinking. So that's another buzz term. It is an incoming discourse. So it will be the way that we in the sector talk about the universe. And it's this idea of systems thinking. So what does systems thinking look like from a cultural perspective? I don't think the work's been done on that. I'm not putting my hand up to do it either. But I'm saying that it's a place that we can start and get some research going and some discussion around that. So it's always also too easy to point out that you need to eat more fruit and vegetables versus well, we actually need to address inequalities, we need to address income disparities, we need to address people living in cold homes, we need to address landlords who don't provide warm houses. So I encourage you all to understand the dynamics and the facets that are involved in the story because, and approach it from a critical angle too. So one of the examples I have for the healthy fruit and vegetables meal, which is a good one, is they'll often tell you to eat salad or lettuce, but lettuce has nothing compared to puha or to bok choy or other vegetables like that. So that's about understanding where your culture fits and how you can still maintain your self-determination over the way you run your family. So there is a New Zealand culture, but same with Te Miha, I encourage you to hold to your values and your culture as you navigate this space. And that's it. I don't have anything else to say. So I wish I could have